The internet is making people stupider. True.
Whether you like it or not, the internet is making NPCs.
Also, that should be banned from existence. Ugh, disgusting.
Everywhere you go, everybody has the same opinion, the same thoughts. No one is their individual selves. Even for yourself. You might have noticed that you might find it harder and harder to concentrate. Movies or books that could have kept you entertained for hours can barely hold your attention anymore. You might find you're more easy.
Well, to be fair, modern movies are dumb and just boring for the most part in a lot of cases, so yeah. A bad movie is not gonna hold my attention because I'm just gonna stop watching it.
Distracted, jumping from one bit of content to the next in seconds. And it's not just you. The internet is transforming people's brains and making them worse at
Thank God that's not me.
critical reasoning, worse at focusing, and simply stupider. It seems counterintuitive to say the least. Everyone's walking around with 100 libraries worth of books in their pocket. Surely people having a world of information at their fingertips could only make them smarter. It's like imagining a world where everyone has plenty of food, but people are getting hungrier. It just doesn't really make sense. That is until you think about how that information
It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense, in fact.
is being delivered. It might be true that billions of people around the world have all of this knowledge. It's all just
If everything is easy, if everything is put on a plate right in front of you, why would you care ever to do anything the hard way? It's only natural for a human to want to experience the easiest thing in life. For women, let's be completely real, women are a great example of this. A successful and amazing life that other women are going to be envious of you of is pretty much just every day getting drunk and sunbathing on a beach. That is unironically life goals for a lot of people.
sitting there a couple clicks away. However, the problem is that most people aren't reading it. Imagine you gave every kid in the world a magic button. When they press it, they can pick out whatever food they want from a massive menu, and it will instantly appear in front of them. All of them would choose their favorite food, something they knew they loved and that they were familiar with. If they could keep the button, they'd end up eating their favorites for every meal. We'd end up with a lot of chocolate wrappers and empty soda cans lying all over. As well,
That's not actually true. We change what foods we eat constantly because they get boring. And when you haven't eaten something for a while, it suddenly tastes amazing because you have forgotten its taste.
as a lot of fat kids. And this is the problem we face today. We can choose from Google's almost infinite menu for whatever content we'd like, but most people end up choosing the intellectual equivalent of candy time and time again. Things that they know they'll enjoy, and that don't challenge them at all. A never-ending supply of content they know they'll love, delivered straight to their brains on a never-ending conveyor belt. Ever since they began measuring it in the early 1900s, IQ scores have increased by around 3 points every decade. And while IQ might not be equivalent to intelligence, it's at least strongly correlated. Whether
IQ is a great determiner, okay? It's really, really hard to find someone who scores low on an IQ test or someone who scores high on an IQ test and they're not actually either dumb or smart. It's really hard to do that. IQ tests, as funny as that is, are the most probably reliable thing we have to judge intelligence real quickly and fast. Well, real quickly and, in a reliable way.
Whether you think it's because of better education, better diet, or a mixture of factors, we have been getting smarter. That was until a few years ago, as new studies on kids born and brought up during the pandemic have shown that their IQ has dropped an awfully large amount. One study
Well, yeah, because everyone knew, except Fauci, everyone knew that socialization is an extremely a big thing, a big deal in the development of children. It is a pivotal factor, in fact. And if you remove that, well, it's gonna stunt children's growth and whatnot. Scientists, social academiologues, and so many people were talking about this being a thing that's possibly gonna ruin an entire generation and make them effectively stunted and stupid. Just because socialization matters so much, obviously, for children and even adults.
study by Brown University that is still undergoing peer approval showed that, quote, children born during the pandemic have significantly reduced verbal, motor, and overall cognitive performance compared to children born pre-pandemic. Another similar study by Columbia University showed that in fine motor skills, general motor skills,
Oh, that's not even that, huh? Interesting.
and personal social
But yeah, there has been damage already done to kids in lower grades during the pandemic.
skills, babies born in the pandemic were significantly worse off. It all amounts to decades of cognitive development getting wiped out in just a few short years. Now, the reason why is hard to say right now. It isn't because of COVID-19 itself. The study included mothers who had been infected whilst pregnant, and it didn't have much of an impact at all compared to healthy mothers. Instead, the study suggests it's due to stress. With the pressures of possibly losing their jobs, limited social contact, and moving fully online, tons of people were suffering, and parental stress is known to negatively impact the cognitive health and development of children, so it does kind of make sense.
Yeah, that checks out.
And it is pretty much a certainty, however, that the internet isn't directly to blame yet. While it might have stressed out the parents,
I mean, it definitely is to blame. I have talked about this previously, but the most important thing we humans have, and this is by an absolute ginormous landslide, is our language, our lexicon. And the moment that gets reduced, it's completely over. You cannot have complex thoughts about anything if you do not have words to describe these complex thoughts. There is no physics without words being capable of describing those things in physics, for a lack of a better term. And the moment you lose that, there is no higher thinking, because you need to just create new parts of language to describe these things if you don't. Because if you don't have a name for it, how can you even think about it, technically, to a huge degree?
and had a knock-on effect. No 1-year-olds are posting on TikTok or Twitter, even though it might seem like it sometimes with the rise of iPad kids. The important point though is that straight out of the gate, kids are being made dumber by how messed up the world's become. Once these kids go online though, it's a different story. That's when they get thrown.
Dude, online they get even more dumb shit thrown at them. Rizidiyat, you scrap or whatever that is. Dude, that's just poison. That is literally just the equivalent of brain rot being injected into them instantaneously. Because it's so basic. There's no thought in it. It's just a loud sound that, you know, kind of sounds okay-ish, and that's kind of it. And that's bad. That's really bad.
Head first into the maelstrom of information and get influenced by the algorithms. We live in an increasingly online world. The first thing that lots of people do after waking up is opening their phones. It's replaced or is replacing pretty much every other medium of information. In short, it's the new portal into the modern world. The problem is though that the internet's a much more passive yet addicting way of consuming information. Every new headline or post you read is like a mystery box for your brain. It doesn't know what it's going to find, and most of the time it's boring. You can skim tens of hundreds of posts before you find one that actually interests you. You can idly click through the same amount of YouTube videos before finding one you actually want to watch. It's the process that matters in the end, the uncertainty of when you'll get the next hit. It's this process that drives people towards behavior far more efficiently than regular expected rewards. In studies, rats who sometimes get a reward from pushing a button are far more motivated and push the button far more often than rats that always get that reward. It's the same logic behind games, selling people loot boxes instead of just actually selling the loot itself. But what does this mean for kids brought up on these systems? When their window into the world is itself a version of the system of gambling for uncertain rewards, what are the effects? If you've seen a kid who's completely enthralled with their mum's iPad and throws a tantrum if it's taken away, then you've already seen it. This is something society has realized, although it might not have really
belts. You know, go to the side of the forest and get those, you know, really thin pieces of, well, what are they even called? I have no idea. In my language, it has a name. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the name in English is for it, but you probably know what I'm talking about. Okay, this is also the part that our parents were way too cruel to us. Let's be completely real, okay? I disappeared for 2 days in summer, and he's probably not dead. Okay, way too cruel, way too not giving a fuck. And now, considering humans are extremists in every single way possible, now the modern kids are growing up and they have everything because a lot of kids don't want to be like their parents and stuff like that. But I'll tell you the goddamn honest truth. If your kid is acting like a piece of shit and he does not do anything, just fucking on the ass, smack them so they understand their place. Maybe they'll cry, but they're gonna learn the lesson, okay? Affirmative actions are fucking useless if the kid understands that unless they're punished, they can get away with anything. I understood, by the way, that as a kid. Whenever we went out to some kind of place, family, friends, I knew I could do anything because the other adults are obviously too chicken to just punish someone else's child. So you can do anything because your parents are not going to beat the shit out of you while you're in public, and at home they're going to forget about it because you're acting normal now. So there's no reason to spank you. Again, I completely abused that fact. And do you think children are different nowadays? They understand if they can cry, they can throw a tantrum, they're gonna get that way. And since there's no other punishment, there's no counterplay to that for any parent nowadays. What are you gonna do? Nothing. You're literally always feeding the negative traits of your kid, aka being the center of the universe and always getting their way. That's how it ends.
Accepted it yet. You see, the World Health Organization recommends that schools have strict rules about smartphones and that parents and teachers should drastically limit screen time. The 2019 announcement came after studies showed that intensive use was implicated in poor memory, psychological problems, and mental health issues, as well as text comprehension problems.
Wow.
In other words, smartphones make kids forget things easier, makes them depressed, and makes them worse at reading. Their mistake, though, was in not expanding the advice to people above the age of 18. So, what's it doing to adults? If kids were the only ones whose brains were changing and transforming under these pressures, then they'd be the only ones really affected. But everyone from the cradle to the grave has a degree of neuroplasticity. It seems obvious when you think about it. You're always creating new memories whenever you're
adults have way less of that.
Conscious. These are the brain forming new connections or reliving old ones that it recognizes. So whatever age you are, your brain is constantly changing and adapting itself to its environment. The problem is with the modern environment we find ourselves in. In the West at least, pretty much everyone owns a smartphone and interacts with the internet in some way.
I don't. I will never use anything like TikTok. I will never use YouTube Shorts. And my phone is roughly 10 years old at this point. I can't even play games on it if I wanted to. Okay? It's currently actually barely functioning. So, I will never do any of those things because they're bad. They're bad. I will never do any of that crap. I don't want to become a drooling imbecile.
Older people might have chosen not to partake, but among 16 to 24-year-olds in the UK, over 95% own smartphones, and on average, they check them every 12 minutes. The way that so much of our lives are lived through the internet and through screens.
To be fair, for example, I also check my phone every, 20 minutes when I'm out or doing something. But I do that because I'm bored at that point. I'm not talking about actually interacting with people. I think this is completely normal if you're in a gas station waiting in line and you're bored and there's nothing even to look at. You just look at your phone, bip. Yep, well, nothing's happening. Wow, I already knew that, but it's at least something to do.
Makes it far less noticeable than other addictions. If you order your groceries, read your news, and get your entertainment from one device, then it'll become second nature. It makes the cycle of addiction for smartphones and internet use far easier to fall into. The internet has made it much easier to learn everything about anything, but at the same time, it can be really hard to figure out what information is accurate. Most of the time, we assume the first headline or Google result we read is the truth, but that doesn't give us the full picture. And there's a way to actually break free from the internet's algorithm. The same one I use to provide you societal commentary grounded in fact. Change your brain. Anecdotally, it's far more obvious in kids whose brains are far more malleable. This video of a kid swiping on an imaginary iPad in his sleep tells you all you need to know. But scarily, what might seem like a slightly unbelievable video.
Listen, I think I speak for everyone when I say we don't need any kind of peer-reviewed fucking study to say that iPhones for kids are really goddamn bad. That allowing them to play Fortnite for 20 hours straight is goddamn bad. It was different when we grew up because there were periods when we played a lot of games. But gaming has changed in, the decades and whatnot. Then games were hard, and you would not actually get past any reasonable point if you did not have to just think about stuff, think about what you're doing, how you're doing things, and figure out stuff. It was an actual thing that kind of made you think. So it ironically furthered how smart you are, because losing constantly was not great. But now kids are growing up with Fortnite and Call of Duty and all of this garbage, which literally requires no finesse, no thinking at all, instant dopamine, press play, you're in a game, run, 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 shoot, 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 die, repeat. So obviously there's not a lot of finesse in that. Now there can be, obviously, as for almost everything, if you want to go to the highest level of something, but for the typical person, there's no finesse in that. There is no way to actually exercise your thinking capabilities.
Video turns out to have a scientific basis. One study examined how the brains of people who regularly use touchscreens change over time. Those who use them a lot, like smartphone addicts, show an increase in cortical potential for their thumbs and index fingers. It means that people's brains got so used to overusing their thumbs and certain fingers.
Well, no shit, Sherlock. Again, this is everything common stuff. If you start using this finger constantly for a lot of things, it's gonna become more dexterous than the others real quick because you're using it. This is the same concept when blind people have increased sensitivity with smells, sounds, touch, and whatnot, and people who are, for example, I don't know, deaf, have an increased aptitude at feeling vibrations and things like that, because one organ is not working and the others are doing more now because to compensate for it. This makes sense. This makes a lot of sense. It's like learning to do stuff like this with a pen. The more you try and learn this stuff, the more you actually get better at it. It's just a natural process,
Giving the parts of the brain that direct them much more attention than normal. And this is what forms the foundation of the addictive cycle. The brain's unconscious processes see it simply as a reward mechanism. The use of the thumb and the finger swiping on the screen leads to a dopamine release, so the brain adapts to make itself more efficient at it, and possibly loses other skills over time as a result. This is the source of that mindless scrolling we find out.
This 100% leads to loss of other skills. This is all a part of it, obviously. If everything you want is in one thing that you just scroll and don't even think about it, obviously you're gonna lose other things because you no longer need to do other things.
Ourselves immersed in. And so that's just one way that mobile phone use and the internet changes people's brains. But how does it change people's minds? Well, as we go into another election year, in both the UK and the US, as well as a bunch of other countries, people are definitely more divided than ever. In the US, the same moldy candidates and the same black and white issues are dominating the election once again. For some, politics has crystallized into an us v them scenario, where the opposition are completely wrong about everything. For others, the culture war has led to an increasing apathy and detachment from the whole system.
What do you mean? Trump is awesome. Life under Trump for the whole world was better. He's literally the first president in decades who hadn't started a war. He fucking pulled out of one. Well, he couldn't finish, and then Biden botched it. But still, this is not even a competition.
It's like millions of people stopped appreciating the nuance and doubled down on whatever belief system they were predisposed to be attracted towards. And people often blame social media for this, based on how it pushes people towards echo chambers. It's something we'll explore further later on, but it might not be one of the only reasons. Reading.
By the way, hiding the dislikes, for example, Twitter now hides dislikes, well, not dislikes, but hiding likes, I think is great because this is one of those things. It's the same exact thing as modern day quarks. Is this like a modern day quark, or is this an old one? Ah, thank God it's an old one. But I'm against all of these things. You probably know about this. It's the modern day quarks that don't screw off like this, but they move like this. Why is that? Well, that's designed because some people are fucking retarded and they lose the quarks and then they're unhappy. Is it like a 0.001% of the population? Yes. But because they are implementing quirks that lessen the responsibility of humans, we are all gonna be worse because of it. The moment you remove some kind of accountability from a human that they need to do, it instantaneously makes us worse. The more accountability for our actions we have, the better we are. Because if there's no accountability for any action that you take, why would you ever consider even the outcomes of your actions? The moment you know there's no accountability, there's no reason to think. You just do. And that's really obviously bad. And there's a lot of things like that.
Incomprehension is another thing that social media affects. We don't read Twitter or Facebook or really anything else on the screen like we read a book. Instead, we skim read.
Yeah, and not even skim read, but the language used in these things is so ridiculously basic.
Our eyes darting around to find the relevant information. It's completely different to reading line after line in order, more like hunting than just going through it. It's a process that comes from the mechanical dopamine loop we talked about earlier. Our brains try to get more efficient and maximize the pleasure they get. It means they begin cutting out the boring bits and getting straight to the good stuff always, and if they don't find what they're looking for, they get bored and move on. There's always another thing to read or consume, so wasting more than a few seconds of reading something just isn't worth it anymore. And the result of all of this is that people stop reading things that they don't want to listen to. If something doesn't match up with their preconceptions and their expectations, it doesn't give them that dopamine hit and they go elsewhere. People will see and engage with things that make their beliefs seem right, or things that make the opposition seem stupid and wrong. It doesn't help that the tech companies know all of this as well. They specifically feed people rage bait and comfort agreement on a daily basis to keep them hooked on the dopamine cycle. It ends up creating millions of people who are completely submerged in dogmatic thinking and a strict ideology. It all makes mob mentality that much more likely, to the point that it becomes the norm. It's already been established in discourse that herd thinking is everywhere on the modern internet. Just one piece of information, regardless of whether it's true or false, can set thousands of people down the warpath, and a lot of it is to do with the lack of consequences.
Oh, I actually didn't continue the thing about liking and disliking. Liking and disliking being hidden, I initially was against this when it happened on YouTube, but then I started to think about this. Wait a minute, this is good. This is actually good. Now on YouTube particularly, it's not perfect when you're trying to find a solution for a problem with your PC or something like that. Then it's not actually that useful. But for everything else, it is useful. Because if you hide what people are liking, then you don't have that social validation that this thing is good. And you have to decide for yourself. Is this thing good or is this thing bad? And when you need to decide is something good or bad, you inevitably come down to reasoning. Why is it good or why is it bad? And again, the more stuff like that there is, the better.
Anonymity is powerful, and it means that people say whatever they want based on an immediate emotional reaction, but a larger part is due to the experience of being caught up in one of these online waves. If you've ever been packed into a large crowd, then you'll know it's a unique experience. You can find yourself getting sucked in by an undercurrent of shared emotions. Each individual moment is chaotic and confusing. Rumors spread like wildfire. Someone might
I never understood this.
think they overheard something
I may be lucky, but crowds don't affect me.
and spread it around.
Well, they do to a degree, but the moment things are going, wait a minute, this is a little bit too much. It's fun to be a part of the crowd. There's nothing wrong with that. But the minute something starts to go a little bit too much, I'm like, wait, okay, time to stop. I'm gonna go away now or somewhere, unless I want to be a part of a disaster. But I willingly know that that's gonna happen or whatnot. But some people do just get swept into the crowd mentality. One person throws a rock, suddenly everyone's throwing a rock.
And once it catches on, it can change the crowd's mood almost instantly. What's key though, is how the crowd becomes a single entity, which overshadows the individual people that are a part of it. People become united by those underlying emotions, whether they're happiness and joy or fear and anger. It's a powerful, motivating, and almost tribal experience, which we're doubtlessly predisposed to get caught up in by our social biology. It would be useful for a tribe to all feel the same things and amplify their feelings together when they get threatened. It makes them unified and ready for action. What's important about crowds and mobs though, is that they're stupid. One rumor or spark can set them off and make people do things they would never do alone. Normal people turn into temporary monsters, so caught up in the waves of emotions that they do unthinkable things. Social media takes these powerful evolutionary mechanisms and warps them for its own gain. In fact, on social media, the individual gets eliminated pretty much entirely, and everyone becomes part of the crowd, adding to its numbers and consequently adding fuel to whatever
I don't understand how that works, but okay.
fires burning at that time. That skim reading and hunting for information process we talked about goes haywire. Once whatever cause or inciting incident is vaguely understood, not much else matters. People pick up on the emotional undertones of the situation far more quickly than the specific facts. It means they don't have time to be rational and think things through before they get caught up in the wave. To do that would mean denying that addictive process and undoing years of daily conditioning. Another thing that adds to the process is where the information and discussion on a topic actually comes from. A staggering 90% of the internet is made up of what people call lurkers. People who don't interact at all. They don't post comments or even like or upvote things very often. They just read and absorb.
That's true.
What they're absorbing is left up to the other 10% who went out of their way to comment and add to the discussion. Often they'll naturally be more enthusiastic, more interested, or some of the most enraged people out there. They're definitely the ones who care the most about the topic, otherwise they wouldn't be engaging with it. This vocal minority then dictates what everyone else reads and decides the emotional undertones of the online mob. Of course, they're always generally representative of what
They don't necessarily do that.
people are actually feeling. It's just an amplified version.
Because, first of all, you need to read the comments for this to happen. Second of all, you need to agree with them. And if you watch a video, you agree with it, and then you read a comment that disagrees with it. This is false. This is false. Now, the vocal minority is good at getting its way in a lot of situations, because it doesn't matter if you're a minority. If you're the only voice that is being heard, then you are the majority in the eyes of the beholder. So, you're gonna get your way. This is the problem with these very vocal minorities. But the average person is not gonna watch a video that he likes and then he's gonna just see someone comment, this video sucked, and then has a bunch of upvotes and be like, oh my god, people are, this video did suck. Yeah, that's not happening.
Good comparison would be a crowd where everyone is getting pulled along by what the most passionate 10% of people in that crowd feel. Everything about the mob mentality is.
This is true. I don't know if America has this, but in the rest of the world they're called instigators, and if you are deemed an instigator, you're gonna get prison time.
Amplified on social media because of this. And it's only gonna get more real with the rise of augmented reality and virtual reality. And you can probably see this today with your own social media.
Now, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, while I am against all of this, boy, if you can isekai me away, I'm in, boys. Okay, listen. This crap in real life, not unacceptable. But when you can literally just isekai me away, I'm in. Fuck the world. Okay, burn to hell. I'll just spend my time in whatever fantasy world I am, and it's gonna be amazing.
Media habits. This might not be the case for everyone, but tons of people immediately scroll down to the comments to see how people feel. It's useful because it tells the hunting part of your brain whether it's worth being interested in. If you see people saying things you agree with and that interest you, then the content itself is probably worthwhile as well. But something that people might not notice is that it takes away the work of deciding how you personally feel and think about something. The legwork has already been done, and you get to tap into that emotional undercurrent of the online crowd almost instantly. The comments act as a replacement for the way you instinctively take in the atmosphere whenever you walk into a room with other people. This is all relatively natural for things that aren't complex issues with no right answer. If someone famous and well-loved dies, then you can instantly understand the emotions that go along with that. It's heartwarming and comforting to know that so many people are feeling the same things that you feel. It adds a sort of comfort that can temporarily placate how lonely social media and modern life can feel. But the problems arise when it's not a simple situation, and instead it's a complicated issue with no real right answers. The kinds of issues you might find in politics.
Well, if it's a complicated issue with no right answers, you better figure out your own answer. Again, no problem with that. Absolutely no problem. Hey, it can be a complicated issue, but you can still lean for one position, even if it's not 100% right. It's normal. In any case, I think we're done. This kind of seems like just, inspiring dread here at this point without any real necessity. Anyway, this was Quizzer Said. That was Moon. Anyway, have a nice day. Bye-bye.